Let's be honest. When we think of astrology, we're usually picturing those vague predictions in the back of a magazine, right? But what if there was a serious, intellectual argument for it? Well, it turns out there is. A really fascinating book from 1970 made exactly that case, arguing that modern science threw out a complex, ancient system without ever really understanding it. So, let's dive in and see what it has to say.
You've seen this a million times, a super generic line that could apply to almost anyone. And the book we're looking at, The Case for Astrology, it starts right there. The authors basically say, yeah, these newspaper horoscopes, they're a total misuse of what was once a deeply complex system.
So here's the big question. If we just push aside that pop culture version for a minute, what was the original system actually for? This is the central question the book really digs into. It argues that we've been judging this grand, ancient cathedral by looking at a cheap little souvenir from the gift shop.
And here it is, our source material. It was published way back in 1970 by John Anthony West and Jan Gerhard Tunder. Their whole argument is that astrology wasn't superstition at all, but a kind of sacred science. And it was dismissed not because it was proven wrong, but because our entire way of looking at the universe fundamentally changed.
Okay, so the first big idea in the book is a total reframing. It says, you've got to forget fortune-telling. Think of astrology more like a symbolic language. It's a way of describing the fundamental qualities and forces of the universe, and its grammar is based on number and geometry. So let's get into some of that basic vocabulary. According to this book, the zodiac isn't a list of personality types. No. Instead, each of the 12 signs represents a fundamental cosmic function. So Aries isn't just an impulsive person. It symbolizes the very principle of initiation, the beginning of any cycle. And it gets even more layered. It wasn't just about what sign a planet was in. The specific geometric angles between the planets, they're called aspects, were believed to change their influence. It's based on these principles of harmony, almost like how different notes come together to form a musical chord.
And this is where you can really see that the system isn't arbitrary. The book points to this underlying mathematical logic. You have the law of two, where signs just alternate in polarity, positive, negative, positive, negative. Then you have the law of three, which groups them by how they act. For example, Aries, the very first sign, is positive or active. Its mode is cardinal, which means it initiates. The very next sign, Taurus, is negative or passive, and its mode is fixed, so it sustains. Then Gemini is active and mutable, so it adapts. See the pattern? Active, passive, active. Initiate, sustain, adapt. It's a structured, interlocking system.
All right, so if this system was so structured, why did we abandon it? Well, this leads us to the book's core philosophical argument. The authors claim it's because of a huge schism in the Western mind, a complete and total change in how we view reality itself. The book lays out this really stark contrast. The medieval worldview saw the entire universe as a coherent symbol, just packed with meaning and purpose. But the modern scientific worldview, it argues, sees the universe as just a collection of facts to be measured. And in this new view, there's just no room for a system that claims the planets symbolize anything.
To really drive this point home, the authors quote philosopher Alfred North Whitehead. And his point is basically that our scientific certainties are always temporary. They're always limited by our current tools and our current assumptions. The book uses this to suggest that dismissing astrology wasn't some act of objective proof, but really an act of philosophical bias.
Okay, this is where it gets really, really interesting. After making their whole philosophical case, the authors kind of pivot and say, but hey, even if you only accept modern scientific evidence, there are some very strange things out there that you have to explain.
25,000. So what is this number? It's the absolutely massive data set studied by a French statistician named Michel Gauquelin. Now, Gauquelin wasn't an astrologer, not at all. He was a skeptic who set out to disprove the whole thing by analyzing the birth charts of over 25,000 professionals.
And what he found, well, it was this: a statistically significant correlation between the position of certain planets at birth and what profession a person ended up in. Scientists were more likely to be born with Saturn prominent in their chart, athletes with Mars, actors with Jupiter, and so on. These results were just totally inexplicable by chance, and they completely baffled the scientific community. But the book doesn't stop there. It points to this famous experiment with oysters. So they took these oysters, moved them 1,000 miles inland, and put them in a dark lab shielded from all light and temperature changes. For a little while, they kept opening and closing with the tides of their old home. But then, after 2 weeks, they completely resynced their cycles to the moon's position over their new home, a place with no tides at all. It was a hint of some kind of direct, invisible connection to the cosmos. The book then brings up another strange data point. Researchers in the Soviet Union had found that road accidents could spike by up to 4 times the daily average on the day immediately following a major solar flare. This suggested that these huge electromagnetic events in space were having a real, measurable impact on human reaction times and behavior right here on Earth.
And they present one more piece of data. There was a physician, Dr. Edson Andrews, who was pretty skeptical at first, but tracked over 1,000 tonsillectomy cases, and he found that a staggering 82% of post-op bleeding crises happened when the moon was waxing. That's between the first and third quarters. Just another bizarre correlation that our conventional models have a really hard time explaining.
So the crucial point the book is building toward isn't, hey, your horoscope is true. It's something much, much bigger. The book doesn't claim these studies prove astrology. It uses them to argue that we seem to be influenced by cosmic forces in ways our current science can't fully explain. These are anomalies, the oysters, the accidents, the bleeding patterns, that all hint at some deeper connection between us and the cosmos.
This quote from the book really just sums it all up perfectly. The authors argue that the modern worldview is basically built on the assumption that the universe is random and it's purposeless, and because of that, any system that even hints at a deep underlying coherence, a meaningful connection between us and the cosmos, gets dismissed before it's even really looked at.
And that's the final question this 1970 book leaves us with. It's not asking you to believe in your daily horoscope. It's asking you to consider whether the cosmos is just a bunch of random accidents of disconnected facts, or if maybe, just maybe, it's a grand, intricate text, a symbolic language that we've simply lost the ability to comprehend. It's a heck of a question, isn't it?